and welcome to Monthly Mindfulness. I'm Nicola, and this session is all about what I call my 10-day reset or my 10-day retreat. I always refer to it as retreat because it was something that I felt was going into myself for a certain amount of days. And we often think of retreat as being some place that you go to, but ultimately you're coming home to yourself. So this is something that I can do at home by myself, and it's absolutely free. So sometimes when we are feeling overwhelmed, or when we're feeling like there's a little niggle and it's impacting your mood or your behaviour and you're not sure why, or maybe it's something that's been going on for a long time and you're really familiar with those patterns that keep reoccurring, and for whatever reason you're not able to get to a therapist or a one-to-one support, or even speak to a friend, but you got to a place where you kind of feel like you want to move forward but you're struggling to do that. This is when I use my 10-day retreat. So whenever I'm kind of feeling like enough's enough, and everybody has their own line, sometimes we stay in that place for a really long time until we decide, right, enough's enough. It could be falling off the wagon when we're doing healthy eating or a healthy lifestyle. It could be that something's been bothering you about a certain person, or where your life's going, bigger questions, bigger things that are going on. So when we're in that place, sometimes it's very difficult to take action because it seems so far away. It seems like I'm feeling depressed or anxious or completely fatigued, really motivated. And I know sometimes the things that will shift me out of that, but there's this huge gap between knowing what's good for you and being ready to do that. And that's again why I bring this in, because every single time when I start my 10-day reset or my 10-day retreat, by the end of those 10 days, I always feel uplifted and I've always taken some kind of action. But the best bit is there's no kind of pressure, there's no have to and should tos. It all starts with shifting the mind. So it's working with what you know you need to do and unveiling things that you didn't know in a way that isn't pressurizing. The last thing that I want this to be is another to-do list, another work. Sometimes we think of something, for example, like meditation, as work. We think, oh, I must be doing my meditation, I should do my meditation. And then it becomes something that you start to actively avoid, and it's something that becomes less enjoyable. So we're trying to shift our mindset and the whole approach to the way that you do things. I've got a blog that I wrote about getting back into running, getting back into, excuse me, yoga. And basically, as the blog suggests, this can apply to anything that you want to get back into or start doing. For example, with the running, we often think, you can put it under the whole umbrella of health. You say to yourself, I'm a really healthy person, and then you think about what you've eaten, and you think about when was the last time you took a break, or when you last did some exercise. And then sometimes you get this whole motivation, if you're lucky, and then you decide to go, right, I'm eliminating alcohol, chocolate, caffeine, sugar completely. I'm going to exercise 5 or 6 times a week. And all this kind of stuff is really out there in terms of goals, and usually very unrealistic. And a part of us knows this, and what it does is it encourages our self-deprecation. So it's like we know we're not going to achieve it, then we don't achieve it, and then we feel bad about ourselves, and the cycle continues. And what happens is, when you feel bad about feeling bad, you add more on top of that. So just imagine like a well, and in the bottom of the well is this sludge, and in the sludge you have the real emotion, the either demotivation or the sadness or the anger or whatever's going on there, and then you feel bad about having that. You might say to yourself, oh, look at me, there I go again, I'm feeling demotivated, and you add loads more sludge on top of that. And then you think, oh, time's passed by, this always happens, I get really motivated, I start and then I stop, and you put even more sludge on top of that. What we want to try and get to is to acknowledge that we're allowed to feel all the feelings that we have. We're allowed to feel rage from time to time. You know, maybe there's something that needs to be released from that. Maybe there's something from the past that needs to be expressed or exposed and worked on. We're certainly allowed to feel angry when there's a reason to feel angry, and sad and disappointed. It's just about what we do with those feelings. So rather than making yourself bad, feeling bad about having those feelings, is to acknowledge them and have some self-awareness with them. And just a reminder then, the definition of mindfulness, and there is no particular right or wrong, but it's a good idea at this point to set the scene, because our monthly mindfulness sessions look at mindfulness and how to take it that one step further, which means how do I apply it realistically in my day-to-day life. So we often understand the term mindfulness as, you know, trying to live in the now. Obviously that's much easier said than done, and that's why I look at how do we do that. One of the main ways to do that, as you're probably familiar with, is meditation. In fact, so much so that we actually associate mindfulness automatically with meditation. We assume mindfulness is meditation. So mindfulness for me is actually taking any moment, whether that's being in the office, whether that's in your relationship, whether that's by yourself, is to pause. So instead of allowing our minds to basically run the show, whenever we feel anything intense, or even when we're feeling in a calm place, is just to pause for a second and take a moment to understand where you're at, whether that's something small in terms of how you're feeling at that time, or whether it's something bigger in terms of what decision you need to make in your life, for example. It's about pausing, having some self-reflection, self-awareness, and then making a choice. So that choice could be either shifting how you feel, shifting what you're thinking, or it can be the way that you behave or the way that you express yourself in that situation, or it can be the bigger things that you choose to do, the action that you take. So the more that you get to know yourself, the easier it is to decide two things. One thing is, you know, the bits that you would like to maybe develop, areas that you might like to work on. If you're not too keen on those and you want to carry on growing as we do throughout our life. And the other side, which is all about accepting yourself and accepting where you are in the situation. So sometimes we might find ourselves on a spiral. So just coming back to this month's session, which is all about this 10-day reset and 10-day retreat. The reason that I use this one and come back to it time and time again is because by the time I get to the end of it, something has shifted. Now the 10 days can be changed. For me, that works because 7 days kind of feels like, oh, that's easy enough to get through. 10 days just feels like it's a little bit more of a commitment, whereas 30 days plus feels like it's overwhelming when I'm already feeling overwhelmed. It doesn't mean to say that you can't go on and continue with it if you enjoy the process. But what I say to myself is 10 days, I can do anything for 10 days. And at the same time, I don't expect anything of myself. And that's a really big one. It is just about starting to listen to yourself and going from there. I think one of the big mistakes, as I was mentioning about the going for a run, is that we, as I said, we want to cut everything out. We want to start everything and go crazy, and then we let ourselves down. So instead, just put the trainers on, you know, put your running kit on and walk out of the door without any expectations other than I'm just going for a walk, I'm just going to enjoy the nature, or I'm going to just sort of listen, to not take my phone with me and just take like a walking meditation. Maybe you want to go and have a think about something specific. It doesn't matter. The point is, the hardest part of getting back into something like that is turning up. So if you do that, if you're here and listening to this, if you come to a workshop or something else that you've been meaning to go to and you turn up, that's the hard part. Sitting down to start your 10-day retreat and getting out your pen and paper is the hard part, and it is nothing. All you do is just decide. So usually what I find is when I do that with myself, it's like playing a trick on the mind when I go for a run. always and every time I end up running, because I say to myself, if you want to run, run. If you feel like it, you feel like it. You've already shifted your mindset by getting out there in the first place. So from there, you just get into the vibe and you start to enjoy the flow. And before you know it, you're running. And the good bit is, without the expectations, everything is a bonus. So if you want to stop, if you want to walk for a bit, you can. And I do. Because once the momentum is flowing, you will naturally want to start running over time. Like, another run or a few runs later. The building a longer momentum is much more sustaining in terms of your happiness and your lifestyle than these big expectations that we struggle. Why don't we just be nice to ourselves and just say, yeah, you can take a break. If you're struggling right now, take a break, because what happens is you're not letting yourself down in your body. It's not about trying to push harder. You'll find that the next time you go for a run, not only are you interested in it and that you're not afraid of it, but you'll find that you're just that little bit fitter and you will naturally want to go for a run. And as I said, this can be applied to anything. It's kind of like a metaphor. So that kind of mindset is the way that we're going with this 10-day retreat. So sometimes we find ourselves on different areas of what I call this spiral. A spiral going down and there's a spiral going up. But let's just focus on the spiral going down to begin with. So what you might find is there are certain feelings and, as I say, certain behaviours that you might express when you know that you're not in a good place or where you're feeling a little bit out of balance. And for some of you, they might be the same. This is a very generic one. You start to feel frustration, or you're bored of life, or, you start to get irritated, and as it starts to go further down the list, as it spirals a little bit more, you start to feel a little bit of blame, a bit of victimization, and you can get to the point where you're feeling really overwhelmed and really hopeless. And, when it's something that's niggling you, it does tend to kind of creep up on you like this and slowly building. And other times it can be that you're actually thinking you're doing quite well with your well-being, but it's just that something comes to you out of the blue that you weren't expecting, and it can knock you right down to the bottom. Now what that is obviously you're allowed to feel the feelings that you're feeling, and often we want to kind of stay in that place as well until things settle, and that's okay too. There just comes that limit, doesn't there, of how long you're okay to stay down in that place. And it's about understanding that you're there, having that self-awareness, being okay with that, but then gently drawing yourself out of that place. And that's where understanding yourself and what works for you is really important. At the same time, it's also a really good idea to try and understand what your red flags are at different levels along this spiral. So if I go right to the top of mine, one of my red flags is that if I'm going to the depressed place, because if we exaggerate them, the one place is being really depressed and the other place is being really anxious. Generally speaking, when we're on the depressed side, it's usually that fatigue and lethargy that comes with it. And when we're on the anxiety side, we might be really hyper. Of course, there's differences in individuals, but if I'm going on that depressed side, then some of the red flags for me is that I don't tend to tidy up. I know housework is not the be all and end all, but when we do the house nice, then we sometimes feel better. And again, this is just a personal opinion. I am certainly not a very clean, tidy, obsessive in that area. And there's nothing wrong with being like that. But in terms of me, my red flag is I will start to just leave things a little bit more than usual. So it might start with, at the end of the day, when I get ready for bed, I might just leave a small pile of clothes. Nothing wrong with that, right? Because anyway, I'll just do it in the morning. Now, if I don't do that in the morning, no big deal, but I then might leave another pile of clothes. And these clothes tend to build, and then different areas just kind of spreads into other parts of the house. It might be that I just don't put the cereal away, just leave it out. Why not just put it away? Might leave a cupboard door open, or I might just start to not bother with keeping up with the washing up, and it builds. And then what happens from there is not only is there something going on bubbling underneath, but just seeing the sight of that is also adding to it and helping me to spiral further down. Now, if I'm being aware at the time, I can say to myself, oh, there's something maybe amiss here. If you stop it now in its tracks, if you actually do the tidying, then you might stop yourself spiraling further. And meanwhile, you can look at what's going on, what's niggling you. Especially if that starts to be coupled with other red flags, that might be one for me. So it's trying to catch it, being aware enough to catch it before it kind of spirals. But when it gets to the low point, if you don't catch the signals, which is often happens, and that's also fine, or something comes out of the blue and you do find yourself right at the bottom there, it's important to think about, how do I switch this feeling? Because what I think is very, very common, again, we love to exaggerate, we love to have the conflicts of the two opposites. And when I say exaggerate, I mean when we're really down, we look at the opposite and think, how on earth am I going to be joyful again? But it's not actually about going from being really down to really joyful in an instant. It's just about flicking that switch to come over to the other side of the spiral, on the first part of that positive spiral. And I'll talk about that a bit more now, but it was Buddha actually who said that the root of all suffering is attachment, and that sometimes we're too attached on one side and sometimes we're too detached when we cut off our feelings completely. And it's like this can be that indifference as well, where we just don't care. And on this side we maybe care too much, and we flit sometimes because we find it hard to get that balance, like we do in everything. And in the middle is a little bit of non-attachment, so you care, but it's not going to impact you too much on the outcome of something. And this can be applied to anything, sometimes we're too busy, sometimes we're too lethargic, and it's again trying to get that middle. Sometimes we give too much, sometimes we don't give anything. And this is where our struggle is human experience of trying to find that middle ground without guilt, by being true to ourselves, but also by giving back as well. So when we look at the spiral, it's not about going from a really low point to a really high point. Just remember that with the spiral, as the spiral moves down by itself, it also moves up by itself. So all we need to do is just switch it to the other side, and then it will start to build momentum up the other way. So for me, if I was to look at what would be the key word for me, it would be hope, or it would be humour, for example. I always talk about, watching something that shifts your mood, or being around people that shift your mood, that just kind of break that barrier and make you laugh. Because sometimes we fight it, don't we? And we say, no, don't make me laugh. But when they do, everything shifts. And from there, you're on that spiral on the way back up. It builds momentum by itself, because as soon as you start to feel those positive chemicals in the body from laughter or from whatever you have that makes you feel better, such as kindness or cuddles, you get your oxytocin, the love hormone, the serotonin, dopamine. For some people it's a little bit of movement or exercise. For other people, when they're really down at the bottom there, exercise, would be the worst thing that they want. For somebody else, it's enough to shift them. So it is about understanding not only yourself as an individual, but you on the spiral, and each level of that kind of spiraling down, what works for you and what doesn't. So that if you get to a place where you're sort of sinking down here, and then you start to get annoyed with yourself that you can't even bother going for a walk, just remember that walks don't work for you at that level. It's kind of like an experiment, like writing a manual for yourself. So just make a note, a mental note even, just to say, okay, when I reach this point, then walks don't really do it for me. But they definitely do it when I'm feeling a little bit of frustration or irritation, for example, when I'm feeling anxious. So figuring it out and figuring what works for you. So in the session at the weekend, we actually talked about what is it that gives us the signal that we're not feeling good when we're in a place that we're a bit unbalanced. And it could be the niggles, or it could be the big stuff. So just taking a look, excuse me, at this flip chart here, that will give you some indication of what came up. Okay, so some of these things that may be familiar with you, some of these things you probably can't read. So I'll just talk you through a couple of them. We've got mindless cravings. So when you go into like the supermarket and you're just shoving things in the trolley without thinking about it, when you're feeling really lethargic. What we found is that there's lots of opposites as well in people, because some people found that they were really lethargic and slept a lot. So whether that was psychological or whether the body needed more from the stress, and that's kind of another topic to go into, but other people felt they had less sleep. So I think when you're feeling anxious, like people that felt very task orientated, when they were out of balance, they felt kind of really rushed. Trying to get loads done was when they were feeling really anxious, whereas some other people kind of got slower in their actions and started to avoid things. Other behaviours were things like being irritable and snappy. Other people tended to cry more at things like adverts and films and stuff they wouldn't normally. Other people isolated themselves and kind of went into that victim mentality. But what was great here was the acknowledgement of it. And this is the whole, part of this process, because it's all right to feel like that, and everybody has these variants of these different experiences and feelings and behaviours, and it's just about saying, oh well, do you know what, I do this, and someone else saying, yeah, I actually do it like this, and that is part of the healing, is being okay that that's your red flag. In fact, it's a great thing, because more than others, you know where you're at. We looked a little bit of why we hold on to it, but then we just sort of left that for a moment and looked at what do we know and do that's good for us when we're feeling in a really good place. How are we acting? What are we feeling? What tells us that we're in a good place? Because it's funny, we often acknowledge when we're in a bad place, but we don't take the opportunity to praise ourselves we're in a good place, because we're so worried that that good place won't last for long. And let's face it, in life there's always ups and downs and waves. And I've written a blog about this actually. It's called "Positive People Are Always Positive, Aren't They?" ? The answer is no. It's just that there's a different way to come out of it, and this is what this 10-day retreat reset is all about. So yeah, at some point there will be a dip. So why not just embrace the positive moments when you have them? So we've put that people are more sociable, better at saying no because you're confident. There's no self-esteem issues going on, because when you're feeling bad, it's easier sometimes just to say yes, which obviously then will spiral you even further. But when you're feeling confident and good, your self-esteem is stronger, so you're able to say no to things that you don't feel are good for you, your soul, your wellness. More productive, more likely to look enough into the future to make some plans, maybe for the weekend instead of avoiding it. You'd go for a walk, eat well, self-care routines, me time, this kind of thing. So what I asked everybody at this stage was, so looking at the top part of the list, all the things and behaviours that you do, things that we've said, things that you know in your own head. And the opposite of that, when you're feeling fantastic, the behaviours that you've got and the feelings. When you're feeling like the top half of the paper, when you're feeling bad and irritable and fatigued, are you easily able to switch from that and go, yeah, I'll go for a walk, or yeah, I'm going to say no to that confidently, because that's what I need in my life right now. And are you able to eat that healthy salad when you're feeling in a bad place and all you want to do is eat pizza and drink wine? It's not easy, and that's why we struggle, and that's why we get stuck. Because we go to that intense expectation of going, how am I going to go from feeling so bad to feeling so good? What do I have to cut out everything? I'm not ready to do that. I want to stay in this place. And we stay in that place even longer. So as I said, everybody's got a limit to how long you want to stay in that place. And I think the more you do this when you're feeling like that, the easier it becomes to shift yourself out of it quicker. So this is where this 10-day retreat comes in. How do we shift our feelings from one extreme like that to another? With baby steps, and we have to try and get this new concept and mindset in place for it to be worthwhile, for it to be peaceful in our lives. You know, if being happy and peaceful is truly of value and important to you, then you will take it in these baby steps, and you will do it with kindness to yourself. And without that, you'll always be putting up these huge goals that you will inevitably struggle to achieve, and then feel bad in yourself. You need to break that cycle. So we start with small steps. So looking at this sheet on the flip chart here, we've got these small steps, and what do we need to begin with? It is not day one, sit down, start to meditate, do your yoga, read a book, eat healthy. No, it's not like that. What the outcome is depends on where you are and who you are. So, for example, when you sit down to start your 10-day retreat, the first thing and the only thing that you need is positive intention. To know that it takes small steps, and to trust the process, trust the flow of creativity, and most of all, trust yourself. You don't need anything else. Zero expectations. We have to first shift the feeling, and then if you start to uncover some things at this point, if you start to see patterns and analyse, through your 10-day retreat, that's great. You have to decide whether you want to explore that further right now, or whether you want to take that further later by yourself or with somebody one-to-one. But the point is to just uncover some stuff here to find out what's going on, because eventually you will start to take actions. And it's nothing that will come like as a to-do, as a job. It'll just feel very, very natural, and you'll feel positive and confident about it. Because we're not putting any expectations, deadlines, processes, or anything like this on ourselves. We are simply sitting down and looking at where we are right now. Now we're about to go through the actual process, and again, this can be flexible up to what feels right for you. I've set it for 10 days, you can set it for 7 or 3, or longer, like 30 days or more. What I often find is that once I get into it, sometimes I like to continue it for quite a while, just as I want to. So the only kind of discipline in a way is just sitting down every night I've often in the past used electronic devices, but I really prefer now to have just one book that I keep by the bed with a pen and just keep it really simple. So let's then go through the whole process of how to do your 10-day retreat. Right, so obviously the first one here is saying just out it. Really try to be as authentic and honest with yourself as possible. So the first day for me is I just blah everything out, what I'm feeling, who's bugging me, what I'm bugging myself. I don't even worry about the meta emotions, which is the feeling bad about feeling bad. I just write everything down, no shoulds, no have tos, just blurt it out. And whatever you blurt out there, take a moment and just see if you can be okay with that. Because sometimes it's quite tempting to then feel bad. So try to just have no editor, no filter in your mind, get everything out and then go, right, I've blurred it out. I trust myself, I trust the flow, I know there's small steps, and it's just about looking at that and going, okay. Then take a deep breath. And what I tried to do here is, for the first day, is maybe take a moment to write a couple of phrases that make me feel better, so that I can then sleep nicely with it. In a moment, I'll be reading out some of my real 10-day retreats from many years ago, and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. But just let's say that you've had a little look and it sounds like one thing in particular is bothering you the most. That example might be, I have no one around me who I can rely on. Now, depending on how advanced you are in terms of your self-awareness and your self-analysis, depends on how far you take it at this point, because it could be too intense, too deep, too much for you on the first day. So it could be that you just make a note of that, but somebody else might already have some awareness around that and just say, I'm aware of this. This makes me feel unloved, lonely, worthless and angry. And it's something else that you can sort of carry on ranting about on your own 10-day retreat reset. And what you can do at that point is you can play around with words that actually make you feel better, because remember, you don't believe these affirmations at first. Sometimes on day one you can say some affirmations that help to reassure you, build your confidence, and as time goes on you're building affirmations around what it is that you need to action. So it's not about kind of sugarcoating your feelings or pretending that they're not there. It's a little bit about bringing belief into yourself, and also giving you strength and courage to do what needs to be done. So at this point, you can sort of bring some empowerment back and say things like, you know what, I can always rely on myself. This is what's important. I have various people around me to pull from whenever I need to reach out. So here you're kind of going a little bit under the psyche. You're kind of saying to yourself, I'm aware that people are there. It might just not be me that reaches out. So if I do need help and support, I will reach out because there are people there. So you're shifting your mindset to just assuming no one's around to actually, if I ask myself, if I asked them, would they be there? Probably. So maybe it's something about working on yourself and how you feel about reaching out. Another one could be, I can easily set boundaries when I'm supporting others, giving what I'm comfortable with, if nothing is returned. So on this one, we're talking about sometimes we give, and then when people don't give back in return, we get really angry and frustrated with those people. But remember, we're the ones that have chosen to give. So if you're not happy giving, you need to set your boundaries where you are. Giving a certain amount is great. Where do your boundaries stop? So I always ask myself, how much am I willing to give if this person was to not give me anything back? So this is especially on a personal level. If I'm not okay with that, then I need to step back, because we can't expect another person to give back what we're willing to give. So it's something to think about there. So this is just an idea of how you can start to analyse. But for me, on day one, it's very much just outing it, ranting along with it, being okay with whatever's down there, and maybe just saying a few things that will help you feel better, something positive where you are before you get back into bed and go to sleep. And sometimes, you can do it in the morning or you can do this in the evening. I like to do it in the evening. I like to analyse my day, but other people might like to start the day and do it like this. And of course, there's others that would prefer to do morning and evening, maybe compare and get into the habit of doing whichever one at the same time. Okay, so for my day one, I basically just listed things, but in other times I have gone into quite an in-depth sort of rant really about what I'm feeling, without judging anything, without trying to analyse anything as such. So this is an example of one of my day ones, what I'm not happy with. So this is how I've divided it. Feel somewhat demotivated by my current level of work. Number 2, true love and companionship is missing. Number 3, live in an environment that doesn't suit my needs. Number 4, not making time for healing others. So this was before I made my move from corporate to what I'm doing now. And this is probably about 5 years ago. So there was something bubbling under the surface as to a bit of a misalignment in terms of what I really love to do. So my jobs were ticking a lot of boxes for me. I was very happy in a lot of ways, but there was just something underneath that felt like I wasn't really connected fully to my passion. So what I did put was, what I was happy with was I was quite happy with my financial income, that I had time for hobbies and relationships and friends compared to a previous role that I didn't have that. So there was some improvement, and I was quite happy with my fitness. So I was basically keeping fit, whereas over the years, obviously different 10-day retreats start with the fact that I'm not exercising, I'm feeling quite unhealthy. They're all different kind of topics, and sometimes when we feel overwhelmed, It's about not, going into trying to sort everything out. It's just going one by one. And these were the things that were forefront of my mind. So then I just went on to talk a little bit about that and put what I'm not getting out of this job. So what am I getting out of this job and what am I not getting out of this job? I was asking myself. In terms of me dealing with my work situation, my highest values led me to leaving my other job and joining another organisation that supported development financially. So I was in learning and development and they had the budget for it. And they also supported the organisation. Being respected and appreciated was another one, which I felt I was getting. And being a vital component was another. As well as having balance in my work and personal life. So all that was going really well. And I've put, now that I have that, there seems to be a gap. What is that gap? Trying to prove something to other people seemed to have gone. Drive is reduced. So somehow that was keeping me going, but keeping keeping balance and a more quiet life is more important to me to ensure I am also satisfied outside of work. Teaching and training leadership and skills is not enough anymore. I now understand that wellness is more important in all aspects of my life, and that includes work. And I've gone on and on about that. And on this particular day one, I haven't put any affirmations in because it's probably one of my earlier ones. But looking back now, I would probably say at that point, I'm committed to, say for an affirmation, I'm committed to continued soul searching to find out where I'm supposed to be. In the meantime, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm getting a lot out of what I'm doing. These kind of things just settle my mind, but also to keep me encouraged to keep exploring. So looking at day 2, we tend to get a little bit of a kind of a pattern flowing, a little bit of structure. We're starting to expand on things, getting a bit more, an unfolding of patterns and starting to maybe suggest small steps. So again, like I said before, it's not about going bam straight into it. I need to do this, and this. I should be doing, I have to. It's about getting a feeling and then deciding very naturally, I think tomorrow I might just get up and do some stretches before I start the day. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I feel good about that. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Or for someone else, it might be, okay, tomorrow I think what I'll do is I'll have a salad for lunch, but I'll have a nice dinner in the evening, And somebody else, it might be, I will get back into that book. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to read before I do my 10-day retreat writing, or the other way around. But not all three. It's about slowly building and going, okay. Now, if you do anything positive on top of that, fantastic, because then you can write about that and go, wow, actually, without giving myself the expectation, the pressure, I seem to be able to do more, be more productive, be more positive. In the yogic philosophy, there's loads of metaphors about the mind, and one of them that reminds me of this is that the mind is like a shy lady. And I think this is really sort of a sweet image that when you're being watched, you're not really your true self, or you feel that pressure to perform, pressure to do, and you can get all wound up in your own thinking and insecurities. But then when nobody's watching, when no one's around, this shy lady is actually confident, being herself, being bubbly, being funny, and smart. And so when we add extra pressure onto ourselves, and this applies to mindfulness meditation, when we expect that we should have a quiet mind, but it's not. It's about trying to practice re-guiding the mind wandering here and there, being okay when it wanders, and then bring it back to the present moment, and that helps to bring that real deep meditation. So it's the same with this 10-day retreat. It's just about flowing with it, trying things, being kind to yourself, because trust, again, I'm reminding you about that trust the flow and trust yourself. So as we move into sort of day 2, 3, 4, and we're starting to get into it a bit more, I've just put some stuff here like a bit anxious about going back into work tomorrow, cautious of the negative energy I picked up, will try to protect myself and carry out everything I said I would. So a little bit of understanding where I am and a little bit of asking myself what to do. Again, nothing massive, just shifting the mindset through awareness. And I've put some affirmations here. I love my team and my team love me. Tomorrow will be an amazing day where the team take on board everything and go home feeling great. I am inspiring and inspired tomorrow. I'm loving, I'm lovable, and I'm loved. I wake with enthusiasm. I'm productive, creative, clear and focused, and so on. And so it's just kind of to keep me going while I'm working through what is niggling me and keep me positive. And another one for day 3, I'm talking a little bit about where I feel any tension in the body itself. I'm starting to understand what it is I want to do. So for example, I felt very motivated to discover that becoming a psychologist is what I really want. I'm going to start my positive affirmations in the evening and the morning, and so on. And I've just put a couple of tasks to do on that day. So I've put, we'll keep focused on exercise. I've got a goal to achieve for the 10k run. Everything's going well with that. I'm going to plan on studying a lot more with my preparing for exams, and I'm going to start my meditation once a day. So I'm starting to action things at this point, but nothing too much, just introducing like one thing and continuing with the others, and then a few positive affirmations here. So calm and serene as I walk through life, trusting what life has to bring to me. Nothing I do, say or believe is changing the course of fate. I fully trust the universe and feel confident and carefree. I'm ready to have wonderful relationships. I'm deserving of a loving, trusting and affectionate relationship, and so on. And so I'm kind of on a roll on this one, and I've written quite a lot of positive affirmations. I'm clearly feeling more positive in myself, starting to believe positive things about myself. And at the same time, I'm allowing some of the things to come to me as well as actioning and getting that balance there. Okay, so you've got a bit of an example of where we're going and what's kind of progressing on this old 10-day retreat that I did. And now we're having a bit of a look at where are we when we start to get a little bit further down the line with the days that are passing and the things that we're starting to implement. So let's just have a closer look at that. So we can see that our confidence is building. You're starting to apply your inner knowledge. You know, the positive affirmations are starting to sink in. So it's giving you confidence to make those choices, make those moves, action things, feeling good about yourself. Clarity is coming, you're guiding yourself, and you're starting to sort of plan an action, and you're feeling more energetic and so on. So that might look something like this. If I just read another passage out of my 10-day retreat for you. And then by the time I get towards the end, I'm feeling much more structured. I'm kind of going, this is what I feel like. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow. For example, stretching in the morning, write down my affirmations. I'm having a breakfast with berries and muesli, and this kind of thing. And of course, there'll be blips and things, and I can see that in my 10-day retreat. And the blips are there to teach us as well. They're to kind of catch us and to analyse. At this point, we're starting to look and find patterns and things, why I'm feeling like that. And then always ending the day with, your positive affirmations. And again, it's not kind of sugarcoating anything. It's just sort of saying, yep, for example, I am safe, I am strong, and I can withhold the storm. You're not avoiding anything, you're accepting it full on, and so on. I take the drama out of my life and enjoy the energy from peace. I'm constantly working towards my passion and enjoying where I am in this place and time, for example, with towards the end. And at this point you can continue or you can stop there, for example. So at the end of all this, then you're actually looking at what is another yogic term here, which is these 5 different elements. If you're living by these 5 different elements, then you're feeling in balance. So you've got your nutrition, you've got relaxation, you've got positive thinking, you've got breathing, and all these different elements combined are what make us feel good. Of course, breathing is essential to life, but what they mean is the pranayama breath. So when we're stressed, we're often breathing from here. So using the breath to bring life force in to make us feel good, either energized or calmed down, and the food element and so on. So what you can try to do is, if you imagine these 5 components, is try to see where you can dip in to these. When you're out of balance, it might be one of these more than the other that's a pattern for you, but it also might be that one of them is also a key to shifting you out of it. So if you find that your nutrition goes down when you're out of balance, then it might be that you bring in more relaxation to counteract that. Likewise, if you feel that your relaxation goes down and you, in other words, you start to feel stressed and anxious, it might be that you bring the breathing in. So that might be meditation, or it might be yoga or something like this. Again, it's all about finding out who you are and being okay with that, and looking at where you want to develop yourself on one hand and where you want to accept yourself on the other. Understanding where you are on the spiral, what your red flags are, and what can help bring you back up different things at different times on the spiral. And so with a 10-day retreat, that allows you to just pause and reset and mindfully kind of work your way through it. And by the end, you will see that things are being actioned without you really doing anything. It's just that your mindset changes, and that is the catalyst for everything else. So good luck with it. It's there for you whenever you need it. And the one thing I'd say is, don't do it tomorrow. Just start it tonight. Just think, right, I'm getting into bed tonight. I've got my book and I'm going to begin. I have no expectations. Doesn't need to be anything on paper. Doesn't need to be a list or a to-do or anything. It's just blah, and just work from there. But the point is to make a start, and you will see the changes. So I'll see you next time.